And I was, of course, gutted to have lost the deposit. I was thinking we'd go down to about 5%.
Yeah,
So between 5 and 7% was how I was thinking we would do.
yeah,
So it was plotting to go down to less than 3%. But it just shows how angry people were at us. And I
yeah.
was happy with the campaign I ran, and I don't think I could have done much differently.
Shane Painter, who is 21 years old, was a Scottish Conservative candidate in Orkney and Shetland in this year's general election. I interviewed him to understand what went wrong, the importance of young people's voices, and the future of the party. Conservative just got 121 seats in Parliament. What happened?
We got annihilated. It was a really brutal election. I think that's the one thing that everyone can agree on. We got hammered. We got hammered because after 14 years of government, people no longer trusted us. That seems to be the bottom line of it. They no longer thought we could deliver a stable economy. They no longer believed us on immigration. It just seemed on every single issue, because of probably how many times we'd changed prime minister, because of the constant scandals, people thought we were too focused internally and incapable of delivering. Of course. And then let's focus on the local results of these general elections. Of course, Orkney and Shetland, where you was campaigning for the Conservative, was a very strong Liberal Democrats hold constituency. But this year, 586 people voted for you, representing Scottish Conservative Party in this election. Comparing to 2019, 2017, or 2015, you lost more than 3/4 of votes in Orkney and Shetland, and there must be something went wrong. And I'm wondering, is it your fault or the Conservatives? So I'm proud of the campaign I fought. I don't regret the issues I focused on at all. Going into this election, we always knew it was going to be tough. The Liberal Democrats have held Orkney and Shetland for decades and decades I mean, Alistair Carmichael has held the seat longer than I've been alive, and he's been a very good constituency MP, and you can see that in how he's been rewarded in this election. By he's now got, I think it's 55% of the vote share up there. Now, absolutely, I take responsibility for the result up there. But the message I was getting on the door when I was canvassing was what I was saying before. People had lost trust in us. There were people who had voted Conservative in 2019 who thought they didn't think we delivered enough on Brexit, on the fishing industry. There are other people who were really, really angry still over Partygate, as they should be. So it just seems that it was a mix of, it seems the overarching national campaign really cut through. And if you look in Orkney and Shetland, the vote share was down quite considerably. It was down nationally. So there were three things that went wrong for us up there. We lost people to the Liberal Democrats. We lost people to Reform, a sizable chunk to Reform. I think everyone was quite surprised of how high they actually went up. And people also stayed at home. They didn't go and voted, and because we didn't give them a reason to go out and vote for us. Even though the vote share in Orkney and Shetland fell down a bit this year, if you look at the vote share for each party, Conservative, such big increase, Labour, a slight rise, not surprised, and for Lib Dem and Green and Reform UK increased quite a lot. Did your vote go to Reform UK? A portion of it definitely went to Reform, a portion of it went to Liberal Democrats, and some of it just stayed at home. Yeah, why? Because the Reform UK candidate Robert Smith hardly turned up in this election, especially. Oh. And I mean, was there something went wrong during your campaign as a candidate for Conservative? Look, as I said before, I am happy with the campaign that I fought, but I think it comes down to the fact that it was these national issues that were really cutting through, and after 14 years, people no longer trusted us. And I don't think there was much I could have done to change that. I mean, the vote share that we decreased by in Orkney and Shetland, it's along the same lines that our vote share across Scotland went down. And what we're seeing actually in Scotland was the constituencies where we had members of parliament already, with the exception of Gordon and Buchan, but we've always done quite well in the northeast thanks to oil and gas. But in the constituencies where we had people, our vote share seemed to hold up quite well and we managed to hold those seats. But everywhere else where we didn't have a member of parliament already, our vote shares decreased by about 10% in most places. It's a nice change, but when it comes to reform, absolutely the worst thing we can do is go and embrace them, because we lost this election because we lost the centre ground. People stayed at home, and people generally who vote for reform will not vote for Conservatives. It's the same people who voted for reform in the last election, who voted for UKIP before that. They are not Conservatives. And as much as we agree with them on things like immigration, on the need for a fairer immigration system that works better for our economy, and also in stopping illegal migration, there's so many other things that we completely disagree with them on. They are a much more economically left-wing party than we are. They want much more state intervention than we do. And I don't think Nigel Farage wants a merger with the Conservatives, because he is not a Conservative himself. He is a populist. And if anything of the past 5 years, it should show us that populism is not the right direction for us. I think what we'll see from Reform having 5 MPs now is that they're all a lot of bark and got absolutely nothing behind it. They're just all talk, no delivery. And I think the next 5 years will really show that. And actually, I think they've gotten quite lucky in that they only got 5 MPs and not the 13 they were predicted. Because given how their vetting system has been on their candidates, I mean, Robert Smith is the perfect example of how much of a loose cannon a lot of their candidates are, who shouldn't be anywhere near, who don't have the respect that's needed for such an important job. So if they had got the 13, I think we'd be seeing quite a lot in the next 5 years of what Reform candidates have said or would say, and not having them will help Nigel Farage in his mission to professionalise the party. But you should have done that before an election.
Looking forward to the next 5 years, do you admit that the Conservative Party should appeal to Reform UK to get more votes and campaigning for the next general election?
No, absolutely not. I think that would be the worst thing my party could possibly do as we seek to rebuild from this defeat. What we're going to see in the next few weeks and months as we begin to rebuild from this election result is going to be a lot of people who will think that the right thing to do is to merge to Reform because they've seen their vote share go up. That is reactionary, and that is the absolute worst thing we can do. If you look now at Reform's votes, about 14% nationally, I believe, that's only marginally up from what UKIP won in the 2015 election, an election that we won a majority in. The reason we lost this election is because we lost that centre ground, and we lost the trust of moderate people, centrist people, up and down the country. Look, the Liberal Democrats have gone up 68 seats. An overwhelming majority of those are our seats. We've lost lots of Labour seats, and we've lost those seats to Labour on, in many cases, very small majorities, because there was a degree of tactical voting, and what we saw in this election was not a positive vote for Labour. It was a vote against us. Tactical voting played a key role in this. Labour's votes are only up, 1-2% compared to 2019? There's no love, quite clearly. There's no positive vision that people are like, oh, we want Labour in this. We just want the Conservatives out. And if we go to Reform and begin like a merger with Reform, then what we're going to actually see is we're going to see a lot of people who voted for us previously to try and stop that Labour majority. They're going to go, and we saw it in France last night, that when there's a realistic chance of the hard right getting into government, people will vote for the alternative, whether that's centrist or whether that's the left-wing grouping. So no, going to reform, absolutely the wrong thing we can do. What we need to do going forward is and we can't, this has to be quite a long process. The worst thing we can do is rush into this, is we need to take our time, take a deep breath, go through a lengthy leadership election in which the more right of the party, the more centre of the party, and the more left of the party can put forward their visions. Members can then properly interrogate them, and then we choose the direction we go down. But that direction, in my mind, has to be a broad church, common sense, conservative approach.
How long it will be?
As long as it takes.
5 years or a decade?
Potentially 5 years, potentially a decade. Winning back people's trust is not going to be a quick process.
Yeah, in terms of winning back people's trust, according to the Twitter that you twisted yesterday about election map, like how age group vote 2024 general elections. If you look at the age between 18 to 34, so like people like within 18 to 34, around 15% of young people vote for conservative these general elections. And I know that you struggled a lot during your campaign and hosting in Orkney and Shetland in terms of the national service question. So how do you win back young people's trust as you are a young person and those people will accompany you to your like political career in the future, and I believe those people won't vote for you in the next general election.
So the way that we begin to win over young people, and as I said in that tweet, we are facing a demographic time bomb. If we don't take quite substantial corrective action, then we will face electoral oblivion as these people get older and don't view the Conservatives as the party for them. And the only way we rectify that is actually by listening to them and putting their concerns front and centre. So, for example, climate change is one of the big issues that young people really, really care about. We don't talk about our record on climate change anywhere near enough because we have a really positive record on it. Up until we left government a few days ago, we had cut carbon emissions by over 50% compared to 1990 levels, while growing the economy. We have the largest offshore wind farms in Europe. The fourth or fifth? The top 4 or 5 are in Britain. We have a really good record when it comes to climate change. We didn't talk about it. When it comes to creating opportunity, we've been making so many apprenticeships so that people don't leave school thinking their only route is university. And we didn't talk about that enough. We talked about mandatory national service. And then we never thought through the policy enough where we were like, oh, we don't know the answer to that. We don't know the answer to that. Royal Commission, Royal Commission, Royal Commission. That was never going to be an attractive policy to young people. It wasn't a policy young people wanted to see. That was made very clear to me in the hustings. We should listen to that and never go back to that policy again. We didn't talk about house building anywhere near enough. I mean, house building is probably one of our biggest failings of successive Conservative governments since 2010. We are in a housing crisis because we haven't built enough houses. And the only way we're going to do that is by meaningful planning reform, which will start with ripping up completely I think it's the Town and Country Planning Act. It's a dreadful bit of legislation that needs to go, isn't fit for this century. So if we begin to listen to young people and put their priorities at the heart of our future manifestos, we can begin to win them back. Because what young people want to see is they want to see opportunity for them. And that's what Conservatives create best.
We talk about young voice, young voters, but what do you think about the young Conservatives in Parliament? Do you think you are the fresh voice in Orkney and Shetland? Do you think there must be some fresh voice in Conservative Party?
Oh, absolutely. There will be those who think that we have to, going forward, there'll be those who think that we need to retreat and just do more of the same. That won't work. If we're going to win again and get into government again, we need to be a new, refreshed Conservative Party, and young people will play a role in that.
I just have a question quite interesting in this question about like Orkney and Shetland, this constituency is quite tricky. Like the people vote for Lib Dem because they have very strong support there, and they vote for Alistair Carmichael, both for the personality and their policy. And they vote for SNP. I mean, they know they support like independence, and they know like he is the local person. But when it comes to conservative, they only vote for the policy, the party's policy, right?
So going forward, we will have a lot to do to build up a broader picture of our party in the islands. We can't just do it in election time as we've maybe done previously. We've got a Scottish election coming up quite soon, which could be a really interesting election. But I think the one thing that will come out of this election is that the SNP have been hammered. And we will maybe finally in Scotland be able to move away from either vote for the SNP pro-independence candidate or the next best placed candidate to stop the SNP. And the Liberal Democrats relied on that as a crutch in Orkney and Shetland, as we did in many constituencies across the UK, as Labour did in many constituencies in Scotland. So hopefully the Scottish election will begin to be a return to more normal politics, where we can focus on alternative visions and policy programs that goes beyond, are you for independence, yes or no?
From your perspective, do you think Scottish people are losing their interest in independence?
Yes, that was the one thing that came up on the doors when I was canvassing. In Scotland, we have incredibly high waiting lists with, I think it's 800,000, 700,000 people now on waiting lists. Our education system, which was once the best in the UK, is now one of the worst in Europe. We have a drugs death crisis that isn't getting any better. In Shetland, we have an inter-islands ferries that's not working. And it just seems on every issue in Scotland, everything is becoming second to the SNP's focus on independence. And what we saw in this election with the results of Labour going up, with the Liberal Democrats going up, and with us holding our seats, or just going down one seat actually, independence has been, I think for now, definitely put on the back burner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about age, as you mentioned earlier, Sam Carling, the newly elected Labour MP for North Cambridgeshire, is the youngest MP in Britain at 22 years old. And you are just slightly, and he is just like slightly older than you. Do you think to some extent, especially in your constituency, your age is a factor that affects how people vote?
It could have been. If it was, no one mentioned it to me on the doors. I got lots of positive, lots of people going on the doors saying, oh, good for you, someone so young, putting yourself forward on this. But it could have been an issue. I know Sam Carling, he's received, or he was saying on the news that he's received a backlash on social media for his age. But I would, again, like he said on that interview, question what experience is it that you need as a young person that makes you better than someone old?
Yeah. Like people want to see politicians who is local to represent them in parliament, whatever MP or MSP or councillor, they want to see the politician is from local. They want someone who knows their community, how their community work and how farming and fishing work, and they want to see whom they can talk to, and basically they know his or her face in general. So are you sort of this kind of politician in Orkney, Shetland?
Well, I'm from Shetland. I'm from Bettler. It's my home. It's where we moved up to when I was 10. I grew up there. When it comes to farming, we're surrounded by, I think there's 4 crops we can see from our sitting room. So I knew the issues. It was just that we're in a really difficult national election campaign. I mean, you said the SNP went down. What we're seeing is that, and the DUP went down in Northern Ireland. So it's almost where we have incumbent governments, they're getting punished all over.
I mean, when I talk to local people, they know who is Alistair Carmichael. They know who is Robert Leslie, the SNP candidates, and they know Green Party's Alex Armitage, but they don't know you, Shane Painter, the Conservative candidates.
I'm slightly surprised by that, I'll say, but I was out on the door canvassing. I was putting forward the 5 priorities that I thought were important, focusing on farming and fishing, oil and gas, tax. I grew up there as half of the campaign, I thought, and we'll have to continue to improve for 5 years' time, and also the Scottish election that's coming up.
I'm just wondering, when did you join the Conservative?
I joined, when was it? It was not long after Theresa May became Prime Minister. I thought the Theresa May, Ruth Davidson duo was just iconic.
Mm.
I hope we can go back to that more pragmatic conservatism, that more centrist conservatism, the type of David Cameron, Theresa May, Ruth Davidson sort of. But I just had a point I wanted to stay on your is it party or personality that I just thought of. More and more today, it's definitely party over personality. But in this election has shown that personality still has some role in some constituencies. Jeremy Corbyn got in as an independent. We had Jeremy Hunt holding his seat against all expectations. So there is definitely a role, a small role in certain constituencies.
What's your predictions of the upcoming Scottish parliamentary election? Do you think SNP will still hold the majority there?
No, absolutely not. I think we're going to see, well, depending what Labour does in the next couple of years, but if it was held tomorrow, we would see a Labour majority, not a Labour majority, we'd see Labour, because the Scottish Parliament isn't designed to create majorities, we'd see Labour is the biggest party. I think we'd see the Liberal Democrats do a bit better, maybe not significantly because their vote share didn't shift much, but I think they'd do a bit better. We'd hold on, I think, to most of our MSPs because we are quite well embedded in a lot of our areas. So I think we'd hold on. The Greens would do well in Glasgow, in the Central Belt. So I think you'd see a Labour and Liberal Democrat coalition, and then we'd be there on the sidelines as maybe the 3rd or 4th opposition party. The Greens would then be behind us, but we'd be there, and being with a Labour Liberal Democrat government, we'd have a lot more in common with the Unionist Front, and the Scottish Party as a whole is much more centrist, much more moderate than what the Conservative Party in England has been, especially under the likes of Boris Johnson. And we were here in Aberdeen, we were in coalition with Labour on the local council, and that won awards for being the best council in Scotland. So I think we'd have an easier time working with them, but I don't see Labour winning a majority. But it's nice that we'll be able to return to a more normal politics where we're not just always talking about independence. That's going to be our biggest challenge in going forward in Scotland, is we've always been, we are not the SNP, we are the best placed unionist party, so if you care about the union, vote for us. Everyone knows that, but what people don't know is, for example, in Scotland, we support free tuition in universities. We have a really good plan to increase the number of teachers. We want to recruit 1,000 more GPs, 1,000 more police officers. We want to cut the income tax rate. And we don't talk about that enough in Scotland. We don't shout enough about our right to recovery bill. We don't get enough coverage on that. And so now, going forward, it'd be really good for us to begin offering that moderate centre-right vision for Scotland. Because people in Scotland are fed up of paying the highest tax bill in Scotland while not receiving, well, while not seeing a massive difference in their public services.
The SNP may say that the independence of Scotland must be a mandate in their politics, because the poll shows like 50% of Scottish people still prefer independence of Scotland. Like you cannot deny that.
What I would suggest is that one, we need to be really skeptical that what this election has shown. What this election has shown is we need to be really skeptical of the polls. They've massively overestimated the threat posed by, or the vote share Labour would get by about 10%, depending which poll you look at. They completely got wrong the gap between the Conservatives and Reform. We were much further ahead as we knew we would be. And they underestimated us. They underestimated the Liberal Democrats as well. And now that the SNP have just been completely annihilated in Westminster, they only got 30% of the vote. That isn't a mandate at all for independence or another referendum. People's priorities are on the cost of living. It's on drug thefts. It's on, in the northeast of Scotland, they want to see certain roads improved and upgraded. They want to see their schools restored. No, when I was campaigning, no one mentioned independence to me. Now, that could be because Orkney and Shetland is amongst the most unionist constituencies in the UK, but it didn't come up once.
Some of them may want independence from Scotland. That's what SNP's Robert Smith, Leslie campaigning for. Yeah, independence from the UK and independence from Scotland. Be independent island.
When it came, people did bring up greater autonomy for Shetland and Orkney. That's something I fully back, because I don't think, if you look at it since devolution's been set up in Scotland, it's sort of ground to a halt in Edinburgh. From the SNPs, they love centralisation. They centralised the police force. They now want a centralised care system. Every now and again, you get talks of more powers on the NHS being taken away from the different health bodies and putting back into the Department for Health in Scotland. When it comes to planning applications in Scotland, it's, I think, 4 in 10 that are appealed to the central government. The decision of local councils is then reversed, which is wrong, because local councils know what's best place for planning applications in that area better than any committee in Edinburgh.
Who do you think will be the next leader of the Conservative Party?
So far, there's only one person who's put their name forward, and that's Robert Jenrick. So if there was a leadership contest tomorrow, he'd be the only candidate. But if I could choose anyone at the 121 MPs we've had re-elected, it would be Tom Tugendhat. He's sensible, moderate. He's a proper Conservative. National service is at his core with his military background. And he's someone that I think can begin to go out there and begin to rebuild the Conservative Party image and begin to restore trust in voters. And someone who can actually take on Keir Starmer at the dispatch box, because he's not an exciting figure. He is very dull. And we need someone who can, because he's dull, but he comes across professional. We need someone who can match that level of professionalism with a degree of excitement behind them, and I think Tom Tugendhat's the person for that.
Good. So will you be in Orkney and Shetland next general election?
That's 5 years away. You never know. Wait and see.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.